All right, Daf Pei Hey. Friday's Daf, we were talking about Rav Ina's memra, about how Sheikhet Chayla B'Shabbos, you're mechuyev to even continue to do the Kisei Hadam, which we said played into the Shaila whether or not Kisei Hadam might be an extension of the Shechita. Rabbah didn't like it because he had a kasha from the Brisa that Rabbi Yossi said you don't shech the koya on Yom Tif, and if you do the Shechita, you're not mechas the dam because of a kal v'chaymer, that since Mila is Deicha Shabbos, still the suffix will not be Deicha Shabbos, so Kisei that Vadai won't be Deicha Shabbos, certainly a suffix is not going to be Deicha Shabbos. Gemara said, Ki Yashay B'Gvulin Teichiach, She'ein Vadai Deicha Shabbos, Sfekas Deicha Shabbos. The Brisa finished by saying, Hey Shiva B'Lazar Kapar B'Ribi Tshuva Mala Milish Kain Ein Neheges B'Leila Yamim Tovim, Timer B'Kisei Shnei B'Leila Yamim Tovim. The Brisa then continued to be Deicha the Kal V'Chaymer, and the Brisa finished by saying that this is one of the Dvarim that Rabbi Chia said was anal of Tshuva, but still Rabbi B'Lazar Kapar had a Tshuva. So we assumed that the Brisa was talking about the Vadai Kisei that's not Deicha Shabbos, which we assume was talking about the Chayla on Shabbos. And the Gemara was Deichet by saying that maybe that was Avar V'Shachat, and it was only B'Diavad. But in Echanam, if you shecht on Shabbos Beheter, for a Chayla Shish B'Sakona, it might be Mutter, which the Gemara says is be Dumya to Mila, that Ma Mila is Birshus, where the Chiyav happened Birshus, Af Kisinami Birshus, and therefore you see from the Brisa you shouldn't be able to do the Kisui on Shabbos for the Chayla, Kineged Rav Ina. And now after that review, we're picking it up 5 lines from the bottom of Pei Dalet Amud Beis. Omru Lai, this is from the Brisa that we were talking about. They had said to Rabbi Yossi Tkiya Shefer B'Gvulun Teichiach, She'ein Vada Doiche Shabbos Usfeika Doiche Yom Tif, because the Shefer's Chiyav is not Machal Shabbos in the Gvulin, but a matziv of Suffolk Chiyav is going to be Doiche Yom Tif even in the Gvulim. So for the Gemara, my Sfeika, what is this suffix that's going to be Doiche Yom Tif? Ilim a suffix Chel suffix Yom Tif, if it's mamish a suffix whether or not it is Yom Tif. Sashta Vada Yom Tif Dachia, suffix Yom Tif suffix Chol Mi Boy. If Shefer is going to be Doiche Yom Tif itself when it's Vadai, when there's a Vadai Chiyav, certainly is there going to be any shaila about when there is a suffix Chiyav? In other words, if the Torah says you got to blow the Shefer on a day that's Vadai Rosh Hashanah, clearly Yom Tif cannot stand in the way of its Chiyav. And therefore it has to be blown me suffix on a day that you are being Noyeg Yom Tif, even though there's still Isurim of Yom Tif. So how can this be a raya for a suffix Kisei Adam is going to be Deiche Yom Tif? Over there, the Isser is Vadai and the Chiyav is Mei Suffix. Moving over to Tamid Aleph, so we need another pshat of what that suffix Chiyav is. Ela suffix Ish, suffix Isha. If you're blowing the shofar for this androgynous, who you don't know if it's an Ish or an Isha, and we see that Chiyav to blow the shofar is going to be Deiche Yom Tif, that would be a raya connected Rabbi Yossi, that a suffix Kisei Adam should not be Deiche Yom Tif. But Rabbi Yossi is not going to be fazed by that because Rabbi Yossi Latame, Domer Isha Vadoy is Nami Taka. I'm not really misuffic by an androgynous because even on that side that she's a Vadai Isha, you'd still blow a shofar for on Rosh Hashanah. Tanya, like the Brisa says, B'nai Yisrael Saimchen, B'nai Yisrael Saimchais, they don't do smicha. Only the men do the smicha on their karbonos, but not the nashim. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon Oimrim, nashim Saimchais reshus. That nashim can do smicha if they choose to. So just like Rabbi Yossi holds that an Isha has the reshus to do smicha if she wants to, she also can blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah if she wants to. So a person who is a suffix Ish, suffix Isha, has the right to blow the shofar. And the fact that a person can blow doesn't bring a raya that a suffix of another chiyav, like Kisei Adam, is going to be Deiche Yom Tif. But the Rabbanan hold that an Isha can't do smicha, and likewise, she can't blow the shofar. And therefore, according to her, if someone is a suffix Ish, suffix Isha, by blowing the shofar, that's a raya that any suffix chiyav, including Kisei Adam, is going to be Deiche Yom Tif. In terms of pshat, there's an important taisus at the bottom of Amud Beis. When the Gemara said, Ki shofar b'gevulin teichiach she'ein Deiche Shabbos, for taisus, we know that the reason why you don't blow the shofar on Shabbos is because Shem Yavirenu Dal Amos B'Shus Harabim. And that's not negate to Yom Tif. So what kind of raya would that be? To which Taisa says that if an Isha is not mechuyev in the Tkiyah Shofar, there's not even a tzarech ktsas. And according to Taisa's Lishitasai from Masech Tebeya, if you don't have any tzarech at all, you don't say the Hoyel v'Hutra Hoytzal tzarech Huchinam Mishal tzarech, because you have to have that tzarech ktsas. So being that there wouldn't be a tzarech ktsas on that side, it would be also min ha-Torah to carry the Shofar on Yom Tif. Back to the Gemara. Omer Ravina, ulamaydeko amri Rabbanan nami islay pircha. And even according to the Rabbanan's own shita, there's a dechiyah to their taina, because malat Tkiyah Shofar, shekain vada doiche Shabbos b'migdosh, there was a Tkiyah Shofar in the Beis HaMikdash even on Shabbos. Timer b'kisur, you're going to say by kisur adam deleisa klal, you don't have that musag at all. So you don't have a raya from Tkiyah Shofar to say that kisur adam should be doiche with a suffix chiyav like a koi on Yom Tif. Then the Brisa had said, Hey Shiv Rabbi Elazar HaKapar Baribi, Ma Lamila shekain einay neheges b'leila yamim tovim. How can you bring a raya from Mila, which is not going to be negea by night? How can you compare that to kisur adam, which is chayiv by night on Yom Tif? For the Gemara, b'leila yamim tovim hu deloi nehaga, b'shar leilei nehaga. It sounds like you're saying it's not a night thing on Yom Tif, but it is on other nights. You never do Mila at night. And for the Gemara, Ella, this is what he meant to say. Mala Mila shekain eina neheges b'leila is kiviyamim. Tamer b'kisu shenayeg b'leila is kiviyamim, because there is no Mila at night. Enechanami. Omer Rabbi Abba, ze echa min advarim she'omer Rabbi Chia, ein li alehen shuva. The Heisha Rabbi Elazar HaKapar B'Ribi Tshuva. That's one of those things that he was able to answer back even though nobody had another answer. Okay, so the Mishnah. Hashayich Evinim Treifa. Let's say you're shechting a chaya or a bird and it turns out to be a treifa. So you can't eat this thing. Now the question is, do I have to do a kisei adam on it? V'hashayichet la'avodas kechavim, or v'hashayichet chulun b'fnim v'kochim b'chutz, or chaya v'oif haneskalim. So these are classic shchita she'ena ruyas. Of them, Rabbi Meir is mechayev, v'chachamim is patron. And lastly, hashayichet v'nisnablu b'yadei. Let's say you're shechting a chaya or an oif and it becomes a nevela, like you're trying to do a proper shchita but you ruined it. Or hanoicher v'hama'akir, those are pater melachasis because there's not a shchita at all, and therefore there's no mitzvah of kisei adam on those situations. Now, in the last parak by Isavias Benoi, the Mishnah said that if you shecht an animal and it turns out that one of them is a treifa, there's a machlokes Reb Shimon and Chachamim whether or not there's an isser of Isavias Benoi. According to Reb Shimon, you're pater from malchus because a shchita she'ein ruya is nish kein shchita, whereas the Chachamim hold it is considered a shchita. But the problem is we're kind of swapping the shita for this Mishnah, because in this Mishnah, Rav Meir over here said there is a chiyuv of kisei adam even though you're shechting and the animal turns out to be a treifa. So come to Chayz, the Balei Plukta who argue with Rav Meir should be Reb Shimon, and the Chacham who argue with Reb Shimon should be Rav Meir. So why is our Mishnah referring to Reb Shimon as the Chachamim, and the previous Mishnah we're referring to Rav Meir as Rav Meir's name? Omer Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Omer Rabbi Yechanan, Ra Rabbi Dvarav Shel Rabbi Meir ba'Esav Benai. Since Rebbe liked the Shita of Rav Meir by Eisav Benai, so therefore when he wrote the Mishnah, he wrote it as the Shitas Chachamim to give it that more credence. V'd Rebbe Shimon b'Kisei Adam, and he liked Shitas Reb Shimon lagabe the halach of Kisei Adam v'shana b'loshen Chachamim. So there's no steers here. It's all Rebbe choosing to affix the name Chacham to the Shita that he liked. So my time at Rebbe Meir by Eisav Benai, why does he like it over there? Omer Rebbe Shua ben Levi, because Gomer Shchita mishchutei chutz. He's going to learn Gzeir Shava from Shchutei chutz that Mahasim Shchita she'ena ruya shma shchita, afachanami shchita she'ena ruya shma shchita. So too also here by Isavias Benai, even though it's a shchita she'ena ruya, it will blibe a shchita. But Rabbi Shimon my time, why according to Rabbi Shimon that a shchita she'ena ruya is not called a shchita? Because Omer Rabbi Mani bar Patish Gomar mitavoyach tevach v'hachein. When Yosef was telling his helpers to make a suuda for his brothers, we're making a gzeira shava of tevicha. Ma'alon shchita ruya, just like over there he was shechting kosher meat. Afkan shchita ruya. Frekting Marvel Rabbi Meir nami ligmor mi tavoyach. No, because it's not a perfect gzeira shava. Done in shchita mishchita, vein done in shchita mit tevicha. So my nafkamino, what difference does it make? They mean the same thing, so why can't you use it even though it's a different word? Because we have a precedent for that. Hatana devei Rabbi Yishmael, b'shava kain u'ba kain by the tzaras, zui shiva zui bia. Since it means the same thing, you can make a gzeira shava that way. And for the Gemara, hani mil hechad like the dumile. That's only when you don't have a better word to use. It's not something that's exact. Avol ikid the dumile, where you have like shchita and shchita, so that it made the dumile yalfin, and you learn the gzeira shava from the identical word. For the Gemara, Rabbi Shimon nami ligmar mishchutei chutz, since it's the same exact word. So what's the reason for Rabbi Shimon to like it this way better? Because done in chulin mechulin, ve'ain done in chulin mekachim. So the difference of context is enough reason for go to tvicha. Rabbi Meir, and what would Rabbi Meir, who argues with all this, what would he say? Otu oisav yes benai bekachim milay noig. Isn't there also a halacha of oisav yes benai by kachim as well? Even though it's written by chulin, but lemais it applies to kachim. So even according to Rabbi Shimon, the gzeira shav is not really doing chulin to chulin. Bottom line, talk the Gemara. Hainu tekam Rabbi Chia, ra Rabbi devarav shel Rabbi Meir ba'oisav yes benai v'shana b'lashon chachamim, and that's why he called shitas Rabbi Meir chachamim. My time at Rabbi Meir b'kisei adam, and why now on the other way? Why is Rabbi Meir hold that b'kisei adam that a shchita she'ena ruya blibes a shchita? Because Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish gomer shficha mishchutei chutz. We learn the halacha of kisei adam al yidei gzeira shava of the shficha, of spilling out the dam from kodshim, from shchutei chutz. That mala halon shchita she'ena ruya is shma shchita, that's why it's aser. Av kan shchita she'ena ruya is shma shchita. For Rabbi Shimon, who argues about kisei adam, because asher ye'achel ksiv, by a chay or oif that you are going to eat, that means it has to be right to eat. Well, Rabbi Meir, what would he say? Hahulam yutei oif tamei hudasa. You can't eat an oif tamei. That's where it's coming to be mamayit. But for Rabbi Shimon, he'll say oif tamei my taima. That's because the lav bar achilahu. Treifa nami lav bar achilahu. Also, a treifa is not shaykh to eat. So therefore, the term must be coming to mind all the other kind of animals as well from kisei hadam. V'hainu davar Rabbi Chia, ra Rabbi devar shel Rabbi Shimon b'kisei hadam v'shana b'lashon chacham. That's why he liked what Rabbi Shimon said by kisei hadam, because of this exchange. Omer Rabbi Abba, turning over to Talmud Beis. Leila kol Omer Rabbi Meir shchita she'ena ruya shma shchita. This that Rabbi Meir says that a shchita she'ena ruya blibes a shchita, that's not for everything, because Meid Rabbi Meir she'en matirasa ba'achila. You can't eat it. You're not going to say it's a blibes a shchita l'gabe achila, and the Gemara is going to soon ask, well, obviously, but for now let's continue. V'leila kol Omer Rabbi Shimon shchita she'ena ruya lo shma shchita, and the other way, Rabbi Shimon is not saying it's not called a shchita because might Rabbi Shimon shemetaharta midei nevela. Even Rabbi Shimon who holds that shchita she'ena ruya is lo shma shchita, still it's not going to make it tumas nevela. So going back now, Omer Mar, Leila kol Omer Rabbi Meir shchita she'ena ruya shma shchita, might Rabbi Shimon she'en matirasa b'achila. Well, obviously, pshita treifa b'shchita mi mishtarya. No one's going to ever suggest that a shchita's treifa is going to make it kosher. No, like tzricha l'shechet it's a treifa v'umotza ba ben teshachai. Going back to the fourth parak, this is like a treifa that you shech to find the living ben pakua inside. That salkatei techamina, I might think hoil de Omer Rabbi Meir shchita she'ena ruya shma shchita. According to Meir, that it blibes a shchita. Tehani le shchitas imay v'leili boy shchita. Maybe I would think the shchita on the mother would work for that uber, and therefore it won't require a shchita. Kamash Mullen, Dr. Abba, that according to Meir, there's no din of ben pakua, and therefore, even though you did a kosher shchita on the mother, there is no shchita shayach on this uber. Well, for think more of a tizbara, v'Omer Rabbi Meir ben pakua ton shchita, but Meir said that ben pakua always does need shchita. How could there ever have even been a havamina that the ben pakua, which comes from a treifa, would be mutter based on the mother's shchita? After the Gemara, like tzricha Rabbi Savarluk or Rabbi Meir v'Savarluk Rabbanan. The chiddush in this din is that Rabbi holds like Rabbi Meir legabe one thing and the Rabbanan legabe another thing. Savarluk Rabbi Meir damer shchita she'ena ruya shma shchita, but v'Savarluk Rabbanan damer shchitas ima mithartai, that there is a halacha ben pakua and doesn't hold like Rabbi Meir that you've just varfavek the whole idea of ben pakua. And therefore, kivan de Omer Rabbanan shchitas ima mithartai tahani le shchitas ima v'leili boy shchita. I would think maybe the mother's shchita should work for the uber and it should not require its own shchita. Komash Malan Dr. Abba, that according to Rabbi Meir and by extension Rabbi does not hold that the mother's shchita is going to work to be mater the achila of this ben pakua. And now moving to the next thing Rabbi Abba said, well, Leila kol Omer Rabbi Shimon shchita she'ena ruya lo shma shchita, because might Rabbi Shimon shemit tahar to midei nevela, that even according to Rabbi Shimon who holds it's not called a shchita, but still is not going to have tumas nevela. Well, fracting mar pshita. To Omer Rabbi Yehuda Marav, v'Omer leba masnisa tana v'chi yomus mina behema, mixes behema metama, umixes behema ena metama. There are some animals that don't have tuma ve'ezu, and which is the one that doesn't have tuma? Zu treifa sheshachta. It's beforish. And since the Brisa learns this from a pasuk, Rabbi Shimon certainly is going to agree with this. So why would a rabbi need to tell us the chiddush according to Rabbi Shimon that there's no tumas nevela? And for the Gemara, l'tzricha lishchetas hatreifa v'yichulin bazara. We're talking about a particular shchitas treifa that was in chulin bazara. Ditanya, because we learned in the Brisa, hashaychetas hatreifa v'chein hashaychet v'nimtzas treifa zeh v'zeh chulin ba'azara. Rabbi Shimon mater ba'ana v'chachamim is oisrin. V'chachamim said by chulin ba'azara, since the shchita she'en ruya is shma shchita, it will be considered aser ba'ana even though it's a treifa. Sal katay techamina hoyel v'omer Rabbi Shimon muter ba'ana al malav shchita hiklal, and therefore should even have tumas nevela, and therefore ema midi nevela nami le mitahara. Kamash Blon Soter Baba, that according to Rabbi Shimon, it is matar midei nevela, even though it's a shchita she'ena ru'uya. Now, this whole discussion that we just had is predicated on the idea that a treifa of chulin that's geschachten in the azara is going to be aser bahana, but according to Rabbi Shimon, it's not going to be aser bahana. Omer le Rabbi Shimon labaya. The suffer Rabbi Shimon chulin ba'azara dairaisahi. Rabbi Shimon only makes sense if you tell me alamol, the regular isser of chulin ba'azara, is a din dairaisa, and therefore you can't be nana from it. So according to Rabbi Shimon, since it's not a shchita, therefore it won't be aser bahana. To which Abaye answers back to Rav Papa, Omer le, it's true, he does hold aser mid dairaisa, because what's nan? As the Mishnah Tamura says, Rabbi Shimon Omer, chulin shenishchetu ba'azara yisrafu bo'aish, v'chein chaya shenishcheta ba'azara. And the same thing will be a chaya, which obviously can't be a proper carbon, but if it's chulin ba'azara, also has to be burned. Now, Yamar Bishlam Deraisa, okay, I don't think Gazrina chaya ota behema. That would give me the reason why I got to burn this chaya, which could have never really been brought as a carbon in the first place, but there's a makom for Xera. But Eli Yamar Derabanan, if you tell me that according to Rav Shimon, chulin ba'azara is only in this Derabanan, behema my taima, why by behema lechatchila do you have to burn it? Del ma'asi lamechel kachim b'chutz, only because maybe someone's going to come to eat it outside of the Beis HaMikdash, but he goof Xera, v'anan nekav and nigzer Xera. We do not do that. So it must be the Rav Shimon holds that chulin ba'azara is aser medai raisa. And this is where we're going to call it. And we'll pick it up with Shabbos' daf by Reb Chia Nafalei Yeniva Bekisnei.